Good morning. In the video today, I'll talk of two aspects of Operation Sindoor. The information warfare, which is a very important component of war, and even crisis Operation Sindoor that we saw. And the second is, what is the meaning of the ceasefire that India and Pakistan have agreed to? Let me start with information warfare. Now you see, a very important aspect of information warfare is its credibility. And that can only come when misinformation and disinformation is cleverly mixed with information sharing. And that is precisely what the Pakistan side did. They brought in the number 3 officer of the Pakistan Air Force, Air Marshal Aurangzeb Ahmed, who gave a comprehensive briefing to the international media. On a map, he patiently explained to the media as to how the PAF had acquired the electronic identification of all the fighter jets of the Indian Air Force before Operation Sindoor was launched. He explained to them that the whole concept of warfare of the Pakistan Air Force had changed, and it was no longer about dogfights. It is what he called multi-domain operations. And he explained to them in detail as to how Pakistan had shot down 5 fighter jets of the Indian Air Force on the night of 6/7. Now you see, when you give all this information to the media, you are basically aligning the media to your thinking. And that is precisely what we saw in the news, in all the publications next day. All the writings, the television, because the Indian side never gave this sort of a briefing. No Indian Air Force senior officer briefed the media. I'm talking of the domestic media, forget about the international media. So the international media has gone to town explaining how in detail the 5 fighter jets of the Indian Air Force have been brought down, and they have this new concept of multi-domain operations. So Aurangzeb basically accomplished his mission of information warfare. I'm not saying what he said is wrong or right. All I'm saying is that in the absence of India not reacting, so it is the Pakistani narrative which appears credible. Now, what Aurangzeb did not tell the international media is precisely what I want to talk about, and this is something that the Indians need to know. Where has this multi-domain operations come from? These have come from the Modi government action of 5th August 2019, when it removed 370 and 35A from Jammu and Kashmir. With that single act, it brought Pakistan and China, their two militaries, in a very tight embrace. They were already working together, but that tight embrace was not there. Which is why since then, all the Chinese leaders, starting from President Xi Jinping, have consistently said that China supports Pakistan's security and sovereignty. In other words, PLA will help the Pakistan military against India. And that is precisely, we got a glimpse of it now. And if there is a hot war, God forbid, between India and Pakistan, that is what we will face. And this is what I call a one-front reinforced war. And I have been talking about this since 2019, that look, your threat is not Pakistan, your threat is a reinforced threat, where without showing the hand, PLA is very much there. So it has two aspects. Their multi-domain operation, that they have worked together. One aspect is their capability, and the second aspect is equally important, which is the pilot training and proficiency. I'll briefly talk of both of them. Now you see, what is multi-domain operations? It basically means that there are certain capabilities which have come, and I am only talking of the relevant capabilities to my discussion. I am not going in other capabilities, there are plenty. So 6 capabilities. Now if you put them together, what happens is that the outcome, or what you get out of those capabilities, is more than the sum of those capabilities. Now what are these capabilities? One is fighter jets. Today the top line or the front line fighter jets of the PAF, The J-10 and the JF-17, they both are of Chinese origin. Next, the BVR missiles, beyond visual range missile. We've already heard about of PL-15 missile, which has come from China. Then satellites. The Beidou system of China, which has 44 satellites in its constellation, is today the number one satellite constellation in the world. And Pakistan military has access to its military resolutions, which means as far as Pakistan military is concerned, during Operation Sindoor, it had a complete visibility round the clock of the battle space. And it was also available to them for their missile targeting. Now, the next capability which they showcased was airborne early warning and control fighters. Now, again, these fighters, they are there for tracking a target, identification of the target. This is a capability, big capability, and they have 9 of them, the Pakistan Air Force. Next is electronic warfare, absolutely critical. And Pakistan Air Force, we saw in operation in 2019 Balakot air attacks that they have good electronic warfare. It does 2 things. One is it jams the communications of the enemy, and as part of electronic warfare, there is something called signal intelligence, which basically means that you can listen in to the communication of the enemy, which is what Aurangzeb, he showed a clip of the audio of the Indian pilots talking amongst themselves to the international audience. That added to the credibility. And the next is the data linking. Pakistan Air Force data linking basically means you link up all these capabilities so that all these capabilities which are there, the satellites, the airborne assets, the ground assets, everybody can communicate with one another. Everybody knows what is going on in the battle space at any given time. Everybody knows who's doing what. That is data linking. And Pakistan has Link 17 data linking. It has had for many years now. Now it has upgraded. So these 6 capabilities that I spoke about, the most important in my assessment are data linking, and the second is electronic warfare, 2 multi-domain operations. And why I say that is because as far as the pilot is concerned, his job is he should have a full surveillance of the battle space. He should have early warning, he should have detection capabilities, he should have tracking capabilities, he should have target acquisition capabilities. With all that, then he decides the kill, which target to kill, what destruction to give, and starting from surveillance till the kill is called the kill chain. Therefore, if you have done a lot of training in multi-domain operations, that means you have worked all these capabilities together, then the pilots, all their pilots are in a position to comfortably close the kill chain before the enemy. That means you get the enemy kill before the enemy gets you. This brings me to the second part, which is about proficiency and training. You see, what has happened is that the J-10s and the PL-15 came to the Pakistan Air Force in March 2020. While these 2 air forces, PLAF and Pakistan Air Force, they have been doing training every year since 2012 under exercise series called Shaheen. The earlier exercises were like dogfights, electronic warfare. Since 2020, their exercises now have been elevated to in real combat situation, closing the kill chain earliest. So it's a formidable thing that they are working on, and this is what has come because of the one front reinforced war. This is their information warfare and what they did. Now let's see what was going on the Indian side in these last 4 days. I mean, it can be summed up very simply by saying what was going on is it was buffoonery, which was extremely embarrassing. Even the few channels who didn't do buffoonery, they were picking up the wrong guest. I mean, what is the point of calling up a John Mearsheimer or a Fareed Zakaria? They are experts in their own right, there's no doubt about it. But they do not understand the new triangle that has come in our region. The triangle, what I said, is of China, PLF, China, PLA, Pakistan military and the Indian military. They don't understand that and the implications of that. And then we also had some retired veterans, especially of the army. I don't think they did any credit to themselves. One of them, for example, is a retired Lieutenant General Tiny Dillon. Now, this man writes on the social media that Praveen Sani, that is me, he is part of the Pakistan information warfare. I don't think he dented my credibility, but he exposed his ignorance of modern warfare. Talk about the ceasefire. What is the meaning of this? Now, before I do that, Operation Sindoor was a crisis. Now, between a crisis and a hot war, there is something called a pre-war stage. Now, a pre-war stage is basically about the mobilization of the two armies. As far as the Pakistan army is concerned, it has an advantage at this stage over the Indian army because given the elongated geography of Pakistan, they can mobilize their holding formations which do the holding role on the line of control in 48 hours to 72 hours. And they can also mobilize their strike or offensive formation in the same time frame. They can join the war, which is not the case of the Indian army because Indian army is large, it is spread all over central India. So, while the Indian army, their holding formations can join in 48 hours to 72 hours, the mobilization of the offensive forces takes more time. More time in the sense we saw in the last mobilization done was in Operation Parakram, that was 2001-2002, where the Indian army took 2 weeks for mobilization. This time has been compressed, but still it is not sufficient. It is not comparable to the time frame of the Pakistan army mobilization. So this is about the pre-war situation. Now let's talk about this ceasefire. What has happened is in the last 10 years, 11 years of Modi government, the threshold of a hot war, as I said, has come down substantially 3 notches. The first time happened was in 2019 when the Indian Air Force was brought in to do the Balakot. The premium military force was used against a non-military target. That is the time you created a new normal. The new normal was that in a crisis situation, the Air Force can be used. It had never been used before in a crisis situation between India and Pakistan. So you created a new normal. Now in Operation Sindoor, that new normal existed. So this time, the Pakistan Air Force was prepared. Because there was a new normal, they were expecting this, it will happen. Now you've come down further down your hot war threshold. How? Because this time we saw that drones and missiles, they were freely used on the line of control and the international border, which is what India calls Jammu and Pakistan calls working boundary in Jammu, and then also the international border otherwise between India and Pakistan. So again you've created a new normal, because now what will happen is that even in a crisis situation, both sides will feel free to use drones, to use missiles, and perhaps not only in Jammu and the line of control and the whole of the border. You created a new normal, brought the threshold down. On top of that, yesterday it was announced by the government of India after a meeting the Prime Minister had with the top security team that any future act of terror will be considered an act of war. Now what this means is, if there is another terrorist attack, let's say in Jammu and Kashmir, an attack of terror, now does that mean that India again will mobilize and go to war? What does it mean? I mean, this is the clear thing, what has been said, it should mean that. That means you brought the threshold further down. Another big terrorist attack, we have to go to war, India has to go to war with Pakistan. Pakistan also understands. Now, as I said, in the pre-war stage, Pakistan has the advantage. You have brought the threshold of war down. So there is hardly any distinction left between a ceasefire and both the countries going to hot war. That distinction is blurred today. In other words, the Indian military has to be ready for war at every time. Every time it has to be ready for war if there is a act of terror. So this is the situation right now. So when you see the overall thing, it looks like this. On the one hand, under the Modi government, threat to India has increased. Today the threat is not of Pakistan but a one front reinforced war. That is the threat. It has gone up many notches. On the other hand, as far as the threshold of hot war was concerned, you brought it down. As I explained, that so it's a very difficult situation for the Indian Armed Forces. They have to be always ready for war. Now, what that means, I will explain in another video. Thank you for watching this.